My name is Olivia Chen, and 4 months ago, I was convinced my life was spiraling into a nightmare. At 26, I was working as a kindergarten teacher at a small public school in the outskirts of Boston, barely making enough to afford my modest one-bedroom apartment that I shared with my tabby cat Milo. The heating rarely worked properly. The pipes made concerning noises every morning, and the rent still consumed nearly half of my monthly salary. But those weren't my biggest problems. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The real challenge was that I had somehow found myself invited to the Preston Foundation Annual Gala, one of the most prestigious charity events in the city. An event where tickets cost more than my monthly salary, where the wealthy and connected gathered to supposedly raise money for underprivileged children, while mainly showcasing their designer gowns and million-dollar jewelry. Why was I invited? My childhood friend Natalie had married into the Preston family and insisted I attend. "It'll be networking, Liv. You might meet someone who could help fund your classroom project," she had said excitedly over the phone. The classroom project was my passion, creating an inclusive reading program for children from diverse backgrounds. I had been trying to fundraise for months with minimal success. I remember staring at the embossed invitation for days, my stomach twisting with anxiety. Part of me wanted to decline, to avoid the inevitable discomfort of being surrounded by people who spent more on a single meal than I did on groceries for an entire month. But another part, the stubborn part that my late mother had always encouraged, refused to back down from an opportunity, no matter how intimidating. "Never let fear of not belonging keep you from walking through open doors," Mom had always said before cancer took her when I was 19. Her words echoed in my mind as I RSVP'd with trembling fingers. The week before the gala was a blur of panic. What would I wear? How would I act? Would everyone immediately recognize that I didn't belong? I scoured every thrift store in Boston before finding a midnight blue dress that, with some alterations, looked almost designer. I spent hours watching YouTube tutorials on how to do elegant makeup, and practiced walking in the only pair of heels I owned until my feet were covered in blisters. The night of the gala arrived with an unexpected downpour. The taxi dropped me off 2 blocks away from the venue because of traffic, forcing me to navigate puddles while trying to keep my carefully styled hair from becoming a disaster. By the time I arrived at the Sinclair Hotel's grand ballroom, my confidence was already shaken. The entrance was intimidating. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings higher than my entire apartment building. Waiters carrying silver trays of champagne weaved through crowds of people who seemed to radiate wealth and importance. I spotted Natalie across the room, surrounded by a group of elegantly dressed women. She waved enthusiastically, motioning for me to join them. Taking a deep breath, I made my way across the ballroom, acutely aware of how my dress, despite my best efforts, probably cost less than the clutch purses the other women carried. As I approached, Natalie broke away from the group, embracing me warmly. "Olivia, you made it. You look absolutely gorgeous," she gushed, her familiar voice calming my nerves slightly. "Come meet everyone." The women in Natalie's circle turned to look at me with perfectly practiced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. There were 5 of them, each more intimidating than the last, adorned in designer dresses that probably cost more than my annual salary. "Everyone, this is my dear friend Olivia," Natalie said proudly. "We grew up together. She's a kindergarten teacher now." "How quaint," said a tall blonde woman with a diamond necklace that caught the light with every slight movement. "I'm Victoria Harrington. My husband runs Harrington Capital." One by one, they introduced themselves. Madison Wells of the Newport Wells, Rebecca Sinclair, whose family owned the very hotel we stood in, Alexa Thornhill of Thornhill Pharmaceuticals, and finally, Diana Preston, Natalie's sister-in-law and the chairman of the foundation hosting the gala. "A teacher? How noble," Diana said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It must be so fulfilling to work with children, especially when the pay is so modest." I forced a smile, determined not to let her get under my skin. "It is fulfilling. Every child deserves someone who believes in them." Of course, Victoria chimed in. "We're actually on the board of several private academies. The facilities are just exceptional. Nothing like the public system, I imagine." The conversation continued like this, each comment designed to highlight the gap between their world and mine. When I mentioned my classroom project, hoping to steer the conversation towards something meaningful, Madison gave a patronizing smile. "That's so sweet. We just donated a new science wing to Westfield Academy. costs 7 figures, but the children deserve the best, don't they? My cheeks burned with humiliation. I glanced at Natalie, hoping for some support, but she was busy chatting with a waiter about the champagne selection. I felt increasingly out of place, like an imposter who had somehow snuck past security. The final blow came when Diana looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my dress. That's an interesting choice. Vintage, is it? It's thrifted, I admitted, refusing to be ashamed. Sustainable fashion is important to me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. Oh, is that what they're calling it now? How environmentally conscious. The 5 women exchanged glances, barely containing their amusement. I heard Rebecca whisper something about budget constraints that made the others giggle behind their champagne flutes. If you'll excuse me, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I need to visit the ladies' room. I walked away with as much dignity as I could muster, feeling their eyes on my back. Once around the corner, I quickened my pace, no longer caring about appearing poised or belonging. I just needed to escape. The hallway outside the ballroom was mercifully empty. I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths to calm myself. Tears threatened to spill, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not where someone might see. Are you all right? The deep, gentle voice startled me. I turned to see a man standing a few feet away, concern evident in his expression. He was tall, with broad shoulders, impeccably dressed in a custom suit that spoke of wealth, but without the flashiness I'd seen inside. There was something vaguely familiar about him that I couldn't place. I'm fine, I said automatically, straightening my posture. Just needed some air. He studied me for a moment, his eyes kind but perceptive. The women by the east window, they weren't very welcoming, were they? My cheeks flushed with embarrassment. You saw that? I did, he admitted. And I was impressed. Impressed? I laughed bitterly. By what? My complete humiliation? By your grace, he said simply. By how you held yourself with dignity when others chose to behave poorly. That says more about your character than anything else. There was something in his voice, a sincerity that cut through my embarrassment. I looked at him more carefully, trying to place why he seemed familiar. Thank you, I said quietly. That's kind of you to say. I'm not being kind. Just honest. He extended his hand. I'm James, by the way. Olivia Chen, I replied, shaking his hand. Chen? His eyebrows raised slightly. Any relation to Alexander Chen? The question caught me off guard. Alexander Chen was my brother. Or at least, he had been. We'd grown up in the same modest home in the suburbs of Boston, with our hard-working immigrant parents. But when Alex got accepted to MIT on a full scholarship, something changed. He disappeared into the world of tech startups and venture capital. The last I'd heard, he was somewhere in Silicon Valley, too busy building his empire to return calls or visit during holidays. He's my brother, I admitted reluctantly. Though we haven't spoken in years. Something flickered across James's face. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. Before he could respond, a woman in an earpiece and carrying a tablet approached us. Mr. Westbrook, your speech is scheduled in 15 minutes. We need you for the final briefing. He nodded to her before turning back to me. It was a pleasure meeting you, Olivia. Perhaps we'll speak again later. With that, he was gone, leaving me to wonder who exactly James Westbrook was and why he'd taken the time to comfort a stranger in distress. I considered leaving right then. I could call a taxi, go home, change into my comfortable pajamas, and try to forget this humiliating evening had ever happened. But something stopped me. Perhaps my mother's voice in my head reminding me not to let others define my worth, or maybe just stubborn pride. Instead, I went to the bathroom, fixed my makeup, and returned to the ballroom just as the lights dimmed for the evening's presentations. I found a seat at a table far from Natalie and her friends, next to an elderly couple who smiled warmly at me. The foundation's director took the stage, thanking everyone for their generosity before introducing the keynote speaker, James Westbrook, CEO of Westbrook Innovations and the evening's biggest donor. My eyes widened as the man who had spoken to me in the hallway confidently took the stage. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice commanding immediate attention. "We're here tonight because we believe in creating opportunities for those who need them most. As someone who grew up with very little, I understand the transformative power of having someone believe in your potential." His speech was compelling, passionate about education, technology, and breaking cycles of poverty. As he spoke, I found myself forgetting my earlier humiliation, captivated by his vision of a world where success wasn't determined by the circumstances of one's birth. And that's why tonight I'm pleased to announce that Westbrook Innovations will be donating $50 million to create technology centers in underserved schools across Massachusetts. The room erupted in applause. $50 million. The number was staggering. "But money alone isn't enough," James continued once the applause died down. "These centers need dedicated educators who understand the communities they serve, which is why I'm equally excited to announce the launch of the Chen Education Initiative, named after an extraordinary innovator whose vision for accessible technology education aligns perfectly with our mission." "The Chen Education Initiative?" I stared in confusion. Was he talking about my brother? Alexander Chen started with nothing but determination and a scholarship. Today, his work in democratizing technology education has impacted thousands of lives, and I'm thrilled to share that he will be overseeing this new initiative personally. The room applauded again, and a spotlight suddenly illuminated a table near the front, and there he was. My brother Alex, standing and waving to the crowd. He looked different, more polished, more confident than the awkward boy who had left home all those years ago, but his smile was the same. I couldn't breathe. My brother was here, in this room, and apparently he was some kind of tech education hero. The disconnect between this reality and my understanding of our estrangement was dizzying. As James finished his speech and the evening progressed to dinner, I sat frozen in my seat, unsure what to do. Should I approach Alex? What would I even say after years of silence? The decision was made for me when, halfway through the main course, I felt a presence beside me. Looking up, I found both James Westbrook and my brother standing there. "Olivia," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've been looking everywhere for you." Before I could respond, he pulled me into a tight hug. It was so unexpected, so at odds with the distance that had grown between us, that I couldn't help the tears that sprang to my eyes. "What are you doing here?" I asked when he finally released me. "James told me you were here," he explained, glancing at the man beside him. I couldn't believe it. What are the chances? I looked between them, confusion evident on my face. "You two know each other?" James smiled. "Your brother is my chief innovation officer and one of my closest friends." When he mentioned his sister was a dedicated teacher in Boston, I encouraged him to reconnect. Family is too important to lose. Alex looked sheepish. "I've been trying to find the right time, the right way to reach out. I was actually planning to come to your school next week as part of the initiative launch." "You know where I work?" I asked, surprised. "Of course I do," he said softly. "I've kept tabs on you, Liv. I know about your inclusive reading program, too. I'm so proud of what you're doing." The sincerity in his voice broke something inside me, a wall I'd built after years of feeling abandoned by him. "Then why didn't you call? Why didn't you visit Mom before she—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Pain flashed across his face. I was ashamed. I got so caught up in proving myself, in building something that would make our parents proud, that I lost sight of what really mattered. By the time I realized my mistake, it felt too late. James placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your brother speaks of you often, Olivia. His work in educational technology was inspired by your dedication to teaching. The Chen Initiative is as much about your vision as it is about his." I was trying to process this information when I noticed Victoria and the other women watching us from across the room, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Diana whispered something to Rebecca, who actually dropped her champagne glass. Alex followed my gaze and frowned. "Friends of yours?" "Not exactly," I said, the memory of their condescension still fresh. James's expression hardened slightly. "Those women were quite unkind to your sister earlier this evening." Something protective flashed in Alex's eyes. "Were they now?" He straightened his tie. "Perhaps it's time for some introductions." Before I could protest, Alex was guiding me across the ballroom toward the group of women, with James following close behind. As we approached, I could see their demeanor change, backs straightening, smiles becoming more genuine as they recognized the two powerful men accompanying me. "Ladies," Alex said smoothly, "I don't believe you've been properly introduced to my sister, Olivia Chen." The shock on their faces was almost comical. Victoria recovered first, extending her hand with a suddenly warm smile. "Miss Chen, what a pleasure to meet you properly. Your brother is such an inspiration." "Yes," Diana added quickly. "Alexander has been so generous with our foundation. And that dress is absolutely stunning on you, by the way. The same dress they had mocked less than 2 hours ago." The irony wasn't lost on me. "Thank you," I said simply, refusing to play their game. "Olivia is the real inspiration," Alex said, placing an arm around my shoulders. "Well, I've been building companies. She's been building futures one child at a time. Her work with diverse literacy programs is revolutionary." James nodded in agreement. "In fact, Olivia's classroom will be the first to implement our new technology program. Her methods will serve as the model for the entire initiative." I looked at him in surprise. This was news to me. "If you'll excuse us," Alex continued, "I need to catch up with my sister. It's been far too long." As we walked away, leaving the women staring after us, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and emptiness. Their sudden respect meant nothing to me, yet seeing their expressions change had been undeniably satisfying. Alex led me to a quiet corner of the ballroom. "I'm sorry, Liv. Not just for tonight, but for everything. For not being there when Mom got sick, for missing her funeral, for letting years pass without a word." The apology I had longed for so many years finally came, and I found myself unable to hold on to the anger that had sustained me. "Why now, Alex? What changed?" He glanced at James, who had given us space but remained nearby. "James lost his brother 2 years ago. They hadn't spoken in over a decade, due to some business disagreement. When he found out I had a sister I'd lost touch with, he made me see what I was throwing away." Alex took my hands in his. "I was too proud, too stubborn to admit I'd made a mistake. But I never stopped loving you, Liv. Never stopped being proud of you." Tears welled in my eyes. "I needed you, Alex. When Mom died, when I was struggling to find my way, I needed my big brother." "I know," he said, his voice breaking, "and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. James and Alex insisted on introducing me to people who could actually help with my classroom project: education directors, technology specialists, foundation heads who were genuinely interested in what I was trying to accomplish. By the end of the night, I had more business cards than I could count, and promises of support that seemed sincere. But more importantly, I had my brother back. As the gala wound down, I found myself standing with James and Alex near the exit. "Thank you," I said to James, "for bringing my brother back to me." He smiled warmly. "Family is precious, Olivia. Too precious to lose over pride or distance." "Will you come to dinner tomorrow?" Alex asked eagerly. "I want to hear everything about your work, about your life. I want to be a part of it again." I nodded, a happiness I hadn't felt in years bubbling up inside me. "I'd like that." As we said our goodbyes, I caught sight of Victoria and her friends watching us from across the room, their expressions unreadable, but it no longer mattered what they thought of me. Their judgment had lost its power. Walking out of the Sinclair Hotel that night, I realized something profound. The validation I had received wasn't about my brother's success or James's influence. It was about being seen for who I truly was, a dedicated teacher with ideas worth hearing. The women who had mocked me hadn't suddenly respected me because of who my brother was, but because they had failed to see my worth from the beginning. Their judgment had revealed more about their character than it ever did about mine. As I stepped into the taxi, I thought about my students, especially the ones who came from families like mine, who might feel out of place or less than because of their circumstances. I wanted them to know what had taken me years to understand: that their value wasn't determined by others' perceptions, that they deserved to walk through every door with confidence. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Alex with details for dinner, followed by another that made me smile through tears. I found Mom's old recipe book. Remember her dumplings? I thought we could try to make them together this weekend. Just like that, a piece of my heart that had been missing for years began to heal. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to unexpected blessings. Sometimes the people who try to make us feel small end up revealing how big our world can actually be. And sometimes, finding your way back to family is the greatest success story of all. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of reconnection and new beginnings. Alex and I spent hours catching up, carefully rebuilding the bridge between us that had crumbled over years of silence. Our first dinner together was awkward at first, both of us dancing around the pain of the past, unsure how to address the elephant in the room. "I don't even know where to start," Alex admitted as we sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the Boston skyline. The space was minimalist but clearly expensive, with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art adorning the walls. It was a far cry from the cramped bedroom we had shared as children. "How about with why you stopped calling?" I suggested, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "You missed 3 Christmases in a row, Alex, and Mom's last birthday." He winced, setting down his glass of wine. I told myself I was too busy, that I was building something important. But the truth? He looked at me directly, his eyes filled with regret. "I was ashamed." "Ashamed? Of what?" "Of leaving you both behind." The words seemed to physically pain him. When I got to Silicon Valley, I met people who came from money, from connections, from prestigious families. I started changing myself to fit in, pretending my background was different. The more successful I became, the harder it was to reconcile who I was becoming with where I came from. "We were proud of you," I said quietly. "Mom bragged about you to everyone at the hospital during her treatments. Her brilliant son changing the world." Tears filled his eyes. "I didn't know that. I should have been there." "Yes, you should have," I agreed, not willing to let him off the hook entirely. "But you're here now." That night marked the beginning of our healing. Over the following weeks, Alex became a regular presence in my life again. He visited my classroom, sitting cross-legged on the reading rug as my kindergartners swarmed around him, enchanted by his stories of robots and computers that could learn like people. He helped me implement new technology into my curriculum, bringing tablets and interactive learning programs that my students had never had access to before. One Tuesday afternoon, as my students were filing out to meet their parents, Alex arrived with James Westbrook in tow. "Hope we're not interrupting," James said, looking curiously around my classroom with its handmade decorations and student artwork covering every available surface. "Not at all," I replied, surprised by the visit. "What brings you both here?" Alex grinned excitedly. "We want to show you something. Got time for a field trip?" Intrigued, I gathered my things and followed them to James's waiting car, a sleek but understated luxury vehicle with a driver who greeted me by name. We drove to a building in downtown Boston that I recognized as the headquarters of Westbrook Innovations. The lobby was a stunning space of glass and sustainable wood, bustling with young professionals who nodded respectfully as James led us to a private elevator. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked as the elevator ascended to the top floor. "To see the future of the Chen Education Initiative," James answered cryptically. The elevator opened directly into a large, open workspace filled with designers, programmers, and education specialists, all collaborating at various stations. Large screens displayed colorful interfaces designed for children, interactive stories, and games that taught everything from basic coding to emotional intelligence. "Welcome to the development headquarters," Alex said proudly. "Every person here is working on creating accessible, engaging educational technology for underserved communities." I walked through the space in awe, stopping to watch demonstrations and ask questions about the various projects. The team members spoke passionately about their work, many mentioning that they came from backgrounds similar to mine: first-generation college graduates, children of immigrants, people who understood the importance of educational equity. "This is amazing," I said, genuinely impressed. "But why bring me here?" James and Alex exchanged glances before James spoke. "We want you to lead the educational direction of the initiative, Olivia. No one understands the needs of these students better than the teachers who work with them every day. Your classroom innovations, your understanding of diverse learning needs, that's the expertise we need. I stared at them in shock. But I'm just a kindergarten teacher. No, Alex said firmly. You're an educational innovator who happens to teach kindergarten. There's a difference. We're offering you a position as Director of Educational Programming, James explained. You would work with our team to develop curricula, test implementations in real classrooms, and train other teachers to use these tools effectively. What about my students? I asked, my mind racing. I can't just abandon them mid-year. You wouldn't have to, Alex assured me. This would start as a part-time consulting position until the end of the school year. We could work around your teaching schedule. After that, if you wanted to transition to full-time, we would ensure your classroom received special attention in the program. The opportunity was incredible, a chance to impact not just my 22 students, but potentially thousands of children across the state. Yet I hesitated, wondering if this was charity from my brother rather than recognition of my abilities. As if reading my thoughts, James added, This isn't nepotism, Olivia. We've reviewed your teaching evaluations, your curriculum innovations, the parent feedback from your classroom. Your qualifications speak for themselves. Take some time to think about it, Alex said, sensing my uncertainty. This is a big decision. That evening, I sat in my apartment, thinking about how much my life had changed in just a few weeks. From feeling invisible and inadequate at the gala, to being offered a position that could transform educational access for children like my students. It seemed surreal. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Haven't heard from you since the gala. Everything okay? The girls have been asking about you. I nearly laughed out loud at the transparent attempt to reconnect now that my social status had suddenly changed. The girls who had mocked me mercilessly were now curious about me. I composed several sarcastic responses before deleting them all and simply replying, Been busy with work. Hope you're well. Taking a deep breath, I called the one person whose advice I trusted implicitly. Mrs. Rivera, the veteran teacher who had mentored me since my first day at the school. It sounds like an incredible opportunity, she said after I explained everything. But I hear hesitation in your voice, Olivia. What's holding you back? I'm worried about my students, I admitted. But I'm also worried about myself. What if I'm not qualified for this? What if I'm only being offered this because of Alex? Mrs. Rivera chuckled softly. Child, I've watched you transform that classroom with nothing but determination and creativity. You created a multilingual reading program with donated books and volunteer translators. You built an inclusive curriculum when the district couldn't afford one. Imagine what you could do with actual resources behind you. Her confidence in me was touching, but I still had doubts. What if I lose myself in this corporate world? What if I forget why I became a teacher in the first place? Then you come back, she said simply. Teaching will always be here. But opportunities to change the system from within, those are rare, especially for people like us who didn't start with connections and privilege. After our call, I sat looking at the worn children's books on my coffee table, books I had been planning to translate into various languages represented in my classroom. The work was rewarding but exhausting, and the reach was limited. Perhaps Mrs. Rivera was right. Perhaps this was a chance to create systemic change, rather than just working within a broken system. The next morning, I called Alex and accepted the position. The transition wasn't seamless. I still taught full-time while spending evenings and weekends at Westbrook Innovations, working with designers and developers to create tools that would actually serve teachers' needs rather than just looking impressive to administrators. I insisted on practical features, culturally responsive content, and interfaces that wouldn't intimidate educators who weren't tech-savvy. 3 weeks into my new role, I received an unexpected invitation, a networking dinner hosted by the Preston Foundation, to discuss educational initiatives in the city. I knew immediately that Victoria, Deanna, and the others would likely be there, but this time, the thought didn't fill me with dread. I was no longer attending as an outsider, but as a professional, with expertise and purpose. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple but elegant pantsuit that projected confidence rather than trying to impress. When I arrived at the restaurant, a trendy farm-to-table establishment in the financial district, I was shown to a private dining room where about 20 people were already gathered. Victoria spotted me first, her expression shifting from surprise to calculated warmth as she approached. Olivia, what a wonderful surprise. We've been hoping to see you again. I've been quite busy, I replied politely. The Chen initiative is keeping me on my toes. Rebecca and Alexa materialized beside her, both wearing eerily similar smiles. We've heard so much about the initiative, Rebecca gushed. So innovative. Your brother must be very proud. I'm proud of him, actually, I corrected gently. His vision for accessible technology education is transformative. Diana joined the group, champagne flute in hand. We were just discussing the Foundation's annual education gala. We'd love to have you on the planning committee, Olivia. Your perspective would be so valuable. The invitation was transparently strategic. They wanted connection to the Chen Initiative and, by extension, to Westbrook Innovations. 3 weeks ago, I might have been flattered by their attention, eager for acceptance. Now I saw it for what it was. That's kind of you to offer, I said. But my focus right now is on developing programs that will directly impact classrooms. Perhaps another time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.